Fragments Beyond Time. Chapter 1, The Unending Wake. Michael had always been drawn to mysteries that lay beyond ordinary understanding. From his earliest days he found solace and terror in a world saturated by endless wonder. Nights spent gazing upwards into the cosmic ocean filled him with a sense of possibility and dread alike. As a boy he listened to whispers of ancient lore and scientific revelations that promised to explain the dance of matter and energy. Over time his inquisitiveness led him down the path of theoretical physics and the arcane study of quantum theory. Each lecture and every midnight journal entry only deepened his astonishment at the universe. Yet nothing in his long and diligent study prepared him for the moment that would shatter the boundaries of certainty. It began with quiet anomalies. Michael noticed that the world around him seemed to furtively rearrange itself. In his modest apartment the familiar clink of a coffee cup on the table would sometimes be echoed by an inexplicable shuffling of objects when no one was present. At first he attributed these slight irregularities to an overactive imagination. Yet the unsettling feeling of being watched by intangible forces grew stronger with each passing day. One autumn evening on a rain-slicked street his journey home took an unexpected turn. A screech of tires and the thunder of collision shattered the silence of the night. Everything moved in slow motion as he found himself trapped in a moment of terror, the sounds of shattering glass mingling with his racing heartbeat. Then there was darkness. When Michael awoke it was not at the hospital as one might expect but in the dim light of his own bedroom. The traces of blood on his arms had vanished, the immense pain dissolved as if by magic. Shock and disbelief mingled with the cold curiosity of a scientist who refused to abandon reason. Confronted with an experience defiant of explanation he began to record every detail, a notebook of inexplicable near-death moments. Yet these were not isolated to the street accident. A few weeks later on an otherwise ordinary morning the very act of retrieving the newspaper from the stoop became a brush with oblivion. A misstep on an icy staircase plunged him to the ground with a violence that should have ended his life. Instead he awoke later with bruises and a lingering sense of unreality. In those moments the fabric of time felt torn, as if the death that should have brought final silence was merely the prelude to something else, a cruel cosmic joke that repeated itself. Night after night Michael scoured the literature on quantum phenomena and relativity, searching for any glimmer of explanation buried deep within the tangled equations. The notion of quantum immortality, the idea that in every fatal crisis one's consciousness continues in one branch of reality where the fatal outcome is sidestepped, gradually replaced his feelings of panic. But even as his rational mind clung to this possibility his soul writhed in torment. The relentless cycle of dying and rising, of ever-shifting scenes that defied conventional time, left him questioning what it meant to truly live. Every resurrection blurred the line between life and death until the two were inextricably merged into a tapestry of endless possibility and sorrow. Even as Michael began to reconcile with his perplexing condition, the world itself seemed to pulse with a hidden rhythm that only he could discern. Time itself appeared to falter, as if trying to reveal a secret concealed beneath layers of everyday routine. The chirping of crickets outside his window in the late hours of the night would sometimes elongate into an eerie dirge that bled into silence. Meanwhile the familiar faces of neighbors and passers-by would carry a weight of unspoken despair, as if they sensed that the natural order was slipping away. Michael learned to record these moments meticulously in faded notebooks and scribbled margins, a testament to his desperate need to bring order to the chaos. In the solitude of his study he pored over ancient texts and modern treatises alike. He encountered references to an unyielding cosmic arrow of time that flowed in one direction, yet he could not help wondering if his own existence was undermining that primal order. The textbooks mentioned that the arrow of time was intrinsically tied to entropy and the inexorable march toward disorder. But Michael's experiences were anything but orderly, they were splintered fragments of moments, reassembled in unexpected ways. His existence had become a living paradox where each death was not an end but a branching point, a momentary fissure in the continuous flow of time. At first the idea of quantum branching had fascinated him as a mere intellectual puzzle. In the quiet recesses of his mind he pictured multiple realities spread out like the threads in a vast tapestry, each one carrying a different outcome of every choice. But when his own life hung in the balance repeatedly, the theory was no longer abstract but horrifyingly intimate. A truth emerged that he could neither escape nor control. He was caught in an endless loop of demise and revival, each iteration a ghostly echo of the last. The concept that his awareness would persist while his body was doomed to repeatedly perish turned his world into a bizarre, warped landscape. In the early mornings when the sun crept over the horizon, Michael would sit in silent disbelief. He tried to warn himself that his mind was tricking him, that perhaps the trauma of repeated near-death encounters was to blame for these disturbing sensations. Yet the evidence was irrefutable. He recalled the sensation of falling through an abyss where time decelerated sufficiently for him to register every atomic shudder. He remembered the perplexing moment when a harrowing collision was followed not by a fading into eternal black but by the warmth of an awakening, as if reality itself had conspired to give him yet another chance. With each attempt at normalcy his terror grew deeper, knowing that the foundation of all he had assumed about life was disassembled and reassembled into something unrecognizable. Friends noticed a change in him as well. Their warm smiles and caring inquiries were met with distant looks that suggested he was lost in profound thought. When he tried explaining the phenomenon, the words came out stuttered and uncertain, leaving those who listened with the impression that he was speaking in riddles. Michael's colleagues at the local university exchanged curious glances as he muttered about bizarre events that defied both reason and physics. To them his obsession with quantum paradoxes and the very nature of existence was admirable when couched in the language of academic inquiry. But beneath that veneer lay a desperate soul wrestling with an unparalleled burden, a burden of immortality that could not be shared or understood. In one particularly harrowing incident, Michael experienced what he later described as a moment in which even the laws of physics bowed in deference to the cruelty of fate. Late one evening he had driven along an empty country road when a sudden mechanical failure sent his car careening into oncoming traffic. The impact was violent and unyielding, a collision of metal and shattered glass that should have rendered him unconscious for eternity. Instead he awoke in his childhood bed surrounded by the soft glow of morning light. His heart had raced during the accident, and even now in the calm aftermath he could not shake the feeling of having narrowly escaped an irreversible end. The memories of that day would haunt him in the long hours of solitary night, a constant reminder that his life was not a linear progression but an endless replay of events with slight variations at their core. As the seasons changed and winter crept into the landscape with its icy breath, Michael embraced solitude in the quiet of his study. He delved into every article and book that touched upon the mysteries of time. His nocturnal hours were consumed with diagrams of cosmic evolution, all attempting to explain how time was meant to flow steadfast and unyielding. But his own lived experience was a glaring exception to that principle. Each death and rebirth chip away at the certainty of a past that could not be altered and a future that was predetermined. He began to sense that his personal timeline was not a neat, orderly arrow but a snarled rope that twisted upon itself in a maddening dance. Late nights would find him pacing across his narrow living room, his eyes wide with despair as the weight of his destiny pressed him down. He would pause to listen to the steady drip of rain on the window pane, a rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of an unseen clock counting down to his next resurrection. In these moments the boundaries between memory and expectation blurred, the gentle murmur of his thoughts mingled with the distant hum of the universe. Michael recognized that his existence was transforming into something that defied even the most abstract theories he had once revered. In this domain of perpetual uncertainty, every tick of the clock was both a promise and a threat. The nights grew longer, and with each passing cycle the atmosphere around him seemed charged with a silent menace. Shadows in the corners of the room took on shapes that no mortal mind could comfortably decipher. The interplay of light and dark became a metaphor for the inner conflict that raged within him, as if his soul was engaged in a silent war against the inevitability of oblivion. Michael's instincts screamed that he was witnessing the unraveling of the natural order, yet he was both terrified and compelled to watch the slow disintegration of the world he had once known. In his restless sleep dreams would burst forth with images of broken clocks, twisted mirrors, and endless corridors lined with faces that spoke of lives that were never truly lived. Every moment was saturated with the knowledge that death was not final. That truth was a double-edged sword, the possibility of endless tomorrows clashed with the eternal loneliness of never being able to escape one's fate. Michael found that every day he awoke with a creeping dread that the life he was living was merely a rehearsal for the many variations of a single, unyielding tragedy. Each near-death event was etched deep into his consciousness, forming patterns that he attempted desperately to decipher. Over time he began to think of his notebook not as a mere record but as a cryptic guide to his own soul, a record of events that defied not only logic but also the very flow of time. In the cold light of dawn, as the first rays of sun filtered through the curtains, Michael would stand silently and stare at the blank page of his journal. He had tried to inscribe his experiences in neat prose, yet every word fell short of capturing the surreal terror of his existence. The pages became a silent litany of rebirths and lost moments, a testament to a man condemned by the universe to wander between life and death. Each entry served as both a desperate plea for clarity and a macabre celebration of an existence that was doomed to repeat without mercy. The more he read these notes, the more he realized that his world was rupturing at its seams, a swirling vortex of forgotten promises and ephemeral truths. There were times when Michael would find himself lost in thought, pondering whether he was truly alive or merely suspended between layers of some unfathomable cosmic experiment. His mind would drift to the idea that in some alternate timeline he might have been spared the relentless cycle of demise. Yet even as these fleeting fantasies brushed the edges of his awareness, the terrible certainty would return: he would die again and again, caught in a loop of endless awakenings. The comfort of doubt was no longer available to him. Every moment pulsed with the raw knowledge that the universe had chosen him for a fate beyond reason. On a particularly stormy night, Michael sat at his desk in a daze, watching as rain battered the window and the wind howled like some ancient beast. In that tumultuous symphony he wondered if perhaps the turmoil of nature itself was a mirror of the chaos within him. A spark of determination then took root in his mind. If his life was an endless sequence of events that defied the expected order of time, then perhaps there was a key hidden in the very fabric of nature, a pattern in the roaring storm that could explain his fate. He began to recalibrate his understanding of cause and effect, wondering if there was more to the arrow of time than the relentless march toward disorder. In those moments of feverish introspection he clutched a battered book of physics to his chest and vowed to unravel the mystery, risking his sanity in pursuit of a solution. As the hours bled into the early morning, Michael realized that the truth might be more dreadful than any of his theories had suggested. The more he learned about quantum phenomena, the more it seemed that the universe was a mosaic of possibilities that defied the conventional certainty of life and death. Every moment was fraught with the potential for a rupture in reality, a tearing of the very fabric of existence that left behind nothing but uncertainty and disquiet. The eternal cycle of his own mortality had become a microcosm of cosmic entropy, a paradox incarnate that challenged every fundamental assumption he had ever held dear. In that lonely darkness, as the storm subsided and the first tendrils of dawn emerged, Michael sensed a subtle shift in the air. It was as if the universe had taken a long, shuddering breath and prepared itself for an unfathomable change. He could not help but wonder if his own persistent defiance of death was somehow entwined with a cosmic upheaval. A secret conspiracy of fate orchestrated by the very laws of nature. The idea both repulsed and fascinated him. With trembling hands he closed his journal and resolved that come what may he would continue to seek answers, even if the cost was the gradual unraveling of his fragile mind. And so in that solitary hour Michael embraced both terror and hope. His nights had become a battleground between a relentless force that defied explanation and a quiet determination to understand the hidden mechanics of his fate. In the midst of that struggle the notion of ordinary life evaporated, leaving behind only the persistent, echoing realization that every tick of the clock affirmed one unyielding truth: death might come to claim him in countless forms, but it would never finally silence his existence. Chapter 2: The Void of Causality. Michael soon discovered that the mysteries he encountered on a personal level were intertwined with the grand cosmic dance of black holes and the theory of relativity. The comfortable order of cause and effect, once taken for granted by the common mind, began to appear as a fragile myth crafted by the passing of time. His notebooks filled with indecipherable scribbles evolved into meticulous diagrams and descriptive treatises that sought to capture the interplay between the quiet horror of his daily resurrections and the implacable forces governing the cosmos. In a frayed article bound in peeling leather, Michael had read a passage about the unstoppable pull of gravity near collapsed stars and the enigmatic boundaries where light itself struggled to escape. These passages evoked the image of a cosmic maw, a black sphere devouring both matter and certainty. He became absorbed by the idea that perhaps the very mechanism that allowed his existence to defy finality lay in principles akin to those exhibited by these cosmic behemoths. For in the depths of a black sphere time dilates dramatically, and the boundaries of past and future intertwine in a spectral dance that defies human logic. Driven by a hunger to see the truth with his own eyes, Michael sought refuge at a remote observatory situated on the high ground outside his sleepy town. In the clear, unpolluted air under a star-laden sky he spent long hours peering through a powerful telescope. There in the abyss of space he observed swirling clouds of cosmic dust and distant galaxies that spun in elegant curves. But Michael remained fixated on the subtle distortions near dark patches where light seemed to bend and twist in testimony to a pull beyond reason. In these moments the telescopic lens did more than display distant wonders, it showed him the contours of a universal enigma. A glimpse into a realm where the arrow of time had been twisted and broken. For each time dilation effect, for every flicker of warped light, echoed the arc of his own fractured existence. Late one crisp winter night Michael encountered a revelation that chilled his soul. He was tracking the faint emissions of a distant compact object whose gravitational influence was thought to be immense. The data poured in from his instruments and, as if guided by a strange intuition, he compared the spectral lines with the posts recorded in his notebooks. What he uncovered was staggering. Every signal, every minute fluctuation in brightness, resonated with the recurring patterns of his own near-death moments. It was as if the laws of relativity and the untold processes occurring around a black sphere spoke directly of his relentless survival. Here was a parallel between the catastrophic events that led to his repeated resurrection and the sublime distortions of time near gravitational chasms. This discovery shattered the last remnants of Michael's cautious rationality. The cosmic arrow of time, he now believed, was not the linear progression of events he had once assumed but a complex tapestry woven by extraordinary forces. Far from being a mere observer of these elaborate equations, he was now a living experiment caught in a cosmic web. Every experience of anguish, every brush with death had become a data point in a vast cosmic ledger whose corrections were executed by forces beyond human ken. In the quiet solitude of the observatory he meticulously chronicled his new hypothesis, combining disparate theories from classical physics, modern astronomy and the unyielding logic of quantum phenomena. His scribbled notes formed a tapestry that attempted to reveal how a close encounter with the gravitational abyss could reset the clock of mortality. Within the secret recesses of his mind Michael began to imagine that his own fate was tethered to a celestial mechanism. He envisaged that when a cosmic body collapsed into a black sphere, it might generate a temporal feedback that reverberated through the fabric of spacetime. Under such extraordinary conditions the flow of time could reverse or loop back on itself. The relentless progression of entropy might momentarily pause, then surge unpredictably as if guided by an unseen hand. In Michael's experience every fatal incident was followed by a miraculous reprieve, a suspension of the natural order that allowed consciousness to persist. His unruly existence now appeared to be a mirror of the chaotic dance near the event horizon of a black sphere, where the pull of gravity was so fierce that even the arrow of time itself surrendered to the pressures of infinity. Escorted by this new perspective Michael sought allies among scholars well versed in the nuances of modern physics. At a prestigious academic institute he attended lecture after lecture, engaging in fervent debates over the nature of time and the possibility of superposed realities. His voice, once tentative and halting, grew bold as he recounted his own inexplicable encounters with death. Many listened with timid fascination, while few dared to entertain the notion that a human mind might be a living conduit to quantum phenomena. Still others dismissed his claims as a product of an overly imaginative intellect burdened by isolation and despair. Yet as the days passed the evidence continued to accumulate in Michael's mind, leaving him with the stark conclusion that his curse was as deeply concrete as the gravitational pull of the dark void itself. Within the pages of ancient tomes and in the fervent dialogues with fellow physicists Michael began to see the grim interplay of relativity and the rending of time. Relativity, with its careful balance between mass, energy, and the curvature of spacetime, provided a lens through which the bizarre rhythms of his life could be understood. Light bending in the presence of extreme gravity, time stretching and contracting near cosmic collapses, all these seemed to echo his own encounters with fate. Even as he attempted to trace the mathematical contours of these ideas, his inner voice warned him that the universe was far more treacherous than any elegant formula could encapsulate. Each calculation felt like a step toward a precipice, a straightforward pathway into an abyss of uncertainty that reflected the turbulence of his own soul. Winter deepened and the nights grew long and sorrowful at the observatory. Michael spent endless hours with his instruments, cross-checking data and comparing astronomical charts with the fraught timeline of his personal history. In the soft glow of computer screens and the quiet hum of scientific equipment, he began to realize that his condition was not merely an aberration, but perhaps a deliberate tuning of the universe. The same forces that pulled light into a tight spiral around a black sphere might also be responsible for plucking Michael from the jaws of fatality. It was an idea both sublime and terrifying, that an invisible hand drove the persistent loop of his existence, an eternal experiment at the intersection of physics and fate. His work began to border on obsession. Michael found himself spending entire nights in the shelter of the observatory, lost amid computations and cosmic imagery. In one incident he even managed to record what appeared to be a direct correlation between the intensity of gravitational waves and the precise moments of his near-death experiences. The numbers swam before his eyes, each calculated pulse echoing the resilient beat of his heart in defiance of the natural order. The data became a kind of living scripture for him, a set of cryptic prophecies that forewarned the ineffable connection between his existence and the cosmic forces at play. As Michael ventured ever deeper into this realm of dark cosmic secrets, he began to feel that even the most imposing laws of nature were pliant to the hidden rhythms of the universe. The boundaries between past, present and future softened into a single, indistinct blur. Scenes from his past deaths and those of the distant cosmic dance merged into a single narrative that was both beautiful and horrifying. The immutable arrow of time, he now believed, had been shattered by forces that were both colossal and intimate, leaving behind shards of destiny that defied explanation. In the frozen silence of one particular midnight, Michael sat before a vast black canvas of the universe. He recalled all the near instants when reality had betrayed expectation, the sudden collision on a rain-soaked street, the agonizing fall down a slippery flight of stairs, the unmistakable, shuddering moment before death that was always followed by a return to life. Now as he peered across the heavens, every star seemed to pulse in unison with the erratic rhythm of his heart. It was as if the universe itself was speaking to him in a language older than time, offering subtle hints that his experiences were not random anomalies but deliberate notes in a cosmic symphony. In that inexorable moment Michael reached a singular, chilling conclusion. If the universe had indeed conspired to keep him alive, then every instance of his survival was intertwined with the colossal phenomena he had spent years studying. The very mechanism of a collapsing star and the terrible, ravenous gravity near its remnant might be the key to understanding his own unending journey. With trembling fervor he vowed to unravel every secret, to follow every thread of evidence until he found the hidden nexus where his fate and the relentless pull of the dark void met in an eternal embrace. Yet even as hope and determination flared within him there lingered an undercurrent of dread. For every revelation about the cosmic order that Michael uncovered only deepened the mystery of his cursed immortality. In the interplay between the immutable laws of physics and the haunting persistence of his own life he began to sense that there was a cost too terrible to name. The secrets of the universe were not kind and they did not yield their truths without sacrifice. The longer he delved into the dark recesses of cosmic mechanics the more he felt that the boundaries of his sanity were being eroded, layer by layer, by forces he could neither control nor understand. And so Michael continued his quest amidst a landscape rendered foreign by time itself. With each careful observation and each dogged calculation he edged closer toward a truth that promised to be as terrifying as it was liberating. The once predictable rhythm of life had given way to an endless series of unanswered questions, each one drawing him deeper into the quantum labyrinth. The universe seemed to whisper to him from the abyss, inviting him to discover whether his own peculiar fate was an aberration or the deliberate design of a cosmic order gone mad. Chapter 3: infinite echoes. In the final horizons of his unraveling existence, Michael began to perceive the convergence of all his shattered experiences into one nightmarish tapestry. The world he once knew had dissolved into overlapping layers of memory and future, a kaleidoscope of fragmented moments where every possible outcome coexisted in a timeless limbo. The terrifying repetition of his rebirths now manifested not only as physical events but as shifting echoes of consciousness. Faces he had once known appeared in distorted reflections. The voices of friends and strangers melded together in a dissonant chorus that reverberated in deserted corridors of his mind. He no longer questioned whether these infinite echoes were mere hallucinations. Instead, he accepted them as a natural consequence of a reality in which every moment of death branched into 100,000 possibilities. In the solitude of an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, Michael saw himself in the cracked mirror of a shattered window. The eyes that stared back were not entirely his own but a montage of every version of him that ever was and might be. In that fragmented reflection he recognized the full horror of quantum immortality, an existence where every decision, every fatal incident, was replayed in innumerable variants that defied the single, comforting notion of a linear timeline. The very concept of identity began to fray at its edges. Michael experienced a persistent presence that seemed to permeate his every thought. In quiet moments he could sense other Michaels living different lives, their silent voices merging with his own in conversations that spanned both time and space. With every passing day he faintly perceived a cosmic tug, as though a vast, unseen force was drawing all these fragmented selves together toward a singular, unfathomable destination. The boundaries between memory and imagination, between past sorrow and future dread, melted away until all that remained was the relentless pulse of existence, a pulse that beat in tune with the gravitational rhythm of distant, devouring black spheres. At first he attempted to stamp out these intrusions with logic and willpower. He clung to the familiar routines of daily life, to long-forgotten rituals that once brought comfort in the face of despair. Yet the more he struggled, the more the universe seemed to conspire against a neat separation of self. The cosmos, with its exquisite laws of relativity and its remorseless charts of celestial mechanics, appeared to have sketched his destiny in an endless loop, a design where each death and resurrection stoked the fires of cosmic entropy. Michael slowly realized that his every attempt to escape this fate simply deepened his entanglement with forces as ancient as time itself. There came a night when the boundaries of his crumbling reality collapsed altogether. Michael roamed through empty streets under an ashen sky. The wind whispered in voices that were both familiar and alien. Every step he took revealed glimpses of other lives unfolding in parallel, a version of him laughing at a forgotten cafe, another wandering lost in a forest of memories. It was as if the world had become a mosaic of overlapping moments, each one a transient flicker in an endless tapestry now devoid of clear beginning or end. Driven by a desperate need for answers, he embarked upon daring experiments. One moonless night he sought to recreate the conditions he suspected might break the hold of his cursed existence. Surrounded by scientific apparatus salvaged from shuttered laboratories, Michael constructed a rudimentary device aimed at detecting minute distortions in spacetime. Each calibrated reading, each nuance of spectral light, seemed to confirm his suspicion: he had become a beacon for the collapse of the arrow of time. With every experiment he edged closer to a truth that was both scientifically brilliant and horrifyingly personal. In the midst of these endeavors he experienced a sensation that defied language. It was as though he had been lifted from his bodily constraints and pressed against the dark, cosmic fabric that wove every moment together. In that state he felt the pull of invisible forces, a gravitational embrace that was at once both tender and remorseless. He saw visions of vast fields of celestial bodies swirling around black spheres, their luminous edges bending softly around an unfathomable core. Even as his mind struggled to reconcile these images, he could not escape the unsettling realization that his fate was now indistinguishable from that of the universe itself, a relentless loop where every event was doomed to repeat ad infinitum. In these moments of suspended time Michael realized that rational thought had little power in the face of such colossal mysteries. The theories of entropy and causality seemed like trifling musings compared to the overwhelming force of infinity. The device he had constructed began to spark erratically, its readings shooting upward in a crescendo of numbers that eventually dissolved into static. The signals emanating from the machine merged with the soft hum of a cosmic pulse that he now perceived as the heartbeat of the universe. Standing amidst flickering screens and scattered papers, he felt himself drifting toward a nexus where every possibility converged, a threshold he knew he could never truly cross. In his final recorded note, Michael described a moment that would linger like an unhealed wound in the fabric of time. He sat in a derelict hall on the coldest of nights, his eyes fixed on the tiny display of his device that now spouted incomprehensible data. Outside the broken windows the storm raged as though the heavens themselves were pleading for redemption. It was then that he perceived an unmistakable presence, the promise of an end to his endless iterations, a final silence where the clamor of infinite echoes might give way to oblivion. Yet even as a hope blossomed within him, the universe remained mercilessly indifferent. The electrodynamic signals, the spectral pulses of distant gravitational forces, and the countless facsimiles of his own existence all converged in a final, unresolved crescendo. Standing at the precipice of that unknown abyss, Michael realized that every explanation he had sought was undone by the immeasurable scale of cosmic design. There was no neat conclusion awaiting him in the cold arithmetic of quantum laws. There was only the endless mystery of a universe that had already decided that his fate would be an eternal refrain, a sorrowful ballad played out on an infinite loop. In the final moments of that night he slipped from the confines of what he once called self and became a part of the vast, unsolvable enigma, a single note in an eternal symphony of creation and destruction. His final recorded words dissolved into the static of his failing device as he murmured, with a voice both resigned and defiant, that perhaps his ultimate purpose was not to find the exit from this terrible maze but to become a willing pilgrim on its winding, incomprehensible journey. The dark void of the cosmos beckoned him onward without promise of resolution, leaving him suspended in an everlasting state of uncertainty. A presence that was never fully his own stretched infinitely before him, echoing the cold majesty of collapsing stars and the timeless pull of black spheres far beyond human ken. And so Michael stepped forward, into a darkness that defied explanation and a future that unfolded in uncertain ripples. As the world around him faded into infinite echoes, his fate remained an unanswered question. The cosmic abyss stared back with silent indifference, its mysteries unrevealed and its call eternal. In the impassable realm between life and death, between the known and the unimaginable, Michael vanished into the unyielding night, leaving behind a legacy of unending questions and a final vision of infinity that no mortal mind could ever fully grasp. In that lingering moment the arrow of time itself spun erratically, its course broken into fragments that defied resolution. Michael's journey did not end with a final word or a single cosmic revelation. Instead it dissolved like smoke, leaving behind an unfinished tapestry of infinite possibilities, echoing forever in an uncharted darkness where hope and despair merged into one relentless mystery. The narrative ends here without closure, leaving Michael and his fate suspended on the threshold of infinite possibility. Questions of cause and effect, life and death, persist unresolved in the cold vault of the cosmos. The dark void continues to whisper its timeless refrain, inviting all who listen to wonder if the journey ever truly finds its end.